The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council had seen many historic moments across the centuries. Wars had been declared, peace treaties signed, and entire civilizations had risen or fallen based on decisions made within its crystalline walls. But never before had the chamber witnessed such a gathering of unified concern. Representatives from 47 different species filled the circular hall, their varied forms creating a mosaic of galactic diversity. The Zephyrians floated in their containment spheres, while the massive Karathi delegates required reinforced seating. Crystalline beings from the outer rim sparkled under the artificial lights, and the gas-form representatives of the nebula world shimmered in their atmospheric chambers. Despite their physical differences, all shared the same expression of worry and determination. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Zethkari of the Hegemony, his tall frame and angular features marking him as one of the eldest species in the galaxy. His silver robes rustled as he activated the central holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Red markers indicated human settlements, and their number was disturbing. Esteemed colleagues, Zethkari began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. We gather today to address what can only be described as the greatest threat to galactic stability in recorded history. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The Karathi delegate, General Thokmar, leaned forward in his reinforced chair. You speak of the humans, Ambassador? Indeed. Zethkari gestured to the holographic display. In less than 2 centuries since achieving faster-than-light travel, humanity has established colonies on 37 worlds. They have built military installations on another 15. Their expansion rate exceeds that of any known species by a factor of 12. The display zoomed in on specific systems, showing human ships, space stations, and planetary installations. Each image revealed technology that should have taken millennia to develop, not mere decades. Councillor Veltara of the Academic Union raised one of her forearms. Perhaps their rapid development is simply a natural variation. Some species do advance more quickly than others. Natural? Zethkari's tone carried a sharp edge. Honored Councillor, observe these readings. The display shifted to show energy signatures and weapons capabilities. Human military technology has advanced 300% in just 50 years. Their ships now carry weapons that rival those of species who have had spaceflight for thousands of years. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Council had maintained peace for over 3,000 years through a carefully balanced system. New species were guided through development protocols, their expansion controlled and monitored. Military capabilities were regulated, technology sharing was managed. The system worked because everyone followed the rules. There is more. Zethkari continued, his expression growing darker. Our intelligence networks have detected human military exercises in systems beyond their declared territories. They have been mapping hyperspace lanes that we considered secure. Most disturbing of all, they have been collecting detailed information about our member species. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Delegate Zenthor of the Trade Federation spoke up, his serpentine form coiling with agitation. What kind of information? Military capabilities, political structures, economic dependencies, resource locations, and population centers. Zethkari paused to let this sink in. They know things about us that some of our own allies do not know. The implications were clear to everyone present. Such intelligence gathering was not the behavior of a species seeking peaceful coexistence. It was the behavior of a species preparing for war. General Thokmar's massive fist slammed onto his chair's armrest. Then we crush them before they become too strong. We have done it before with aggressive species. That was considered, Zethkari replied. However, the humans present unique challenges. They do not follow conventional military doctrine. Their ships appear and disappear without warning. They use tactics that none of our military analysts have ever encountered. A direct assault might prove costly. The understatement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the mighty Karathi military, backed by the combined fleets of the Council, was expressing caution about engaging humans, then humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had initially believed. What do you propose, Ambassador? Asked Councillor Veltara. An ultimatum, Zethkari announced. We offer humanity one final opportunity to comply with galactic law. They must cease all military expansion, submit to Council oversight, accept designated territorial boundaries, and provide complete disclosure of their military capabilities. If they refuse, prompted the Zephyrian representative, her voice emanating from her containment sphere. Then we implement corrective action with the full force of the Galactic Council. The vote was unanimous. 47 species representing billions of sentient beings across the galaxy agreed that humanity must be contained. The alternative was too dangerous to contemplate. 3 hours later, Ambassador Zethkari found himself aboard a Council diplomatic vessel, approaching Earth's solar system. The blue and green planet hung before them like a jewel, deceptively peaceful and beautiful. It was hard to believe that such a small world could pose a threat to the entire galaxy. The human orbital stations were impressive, Zethkari had to admit. Massive structures that dwarfed anything his own species had built when they first achieved spaceflight. Human ships moved between the stations with practiced efficiency, and the asteroid mining operations in the outer system showed a level of industrial capability that was deeply concerning. The diplomatic vessel was escorted to Luna Station, humanity's primary diplomatic facility. As they docked, Zethkari reviewed his prepared statement one final time. The words had been carefully chosen by the Council's finest diplomats and legal experts. There could be no misunderstanding of what was being demanded. The meeting room was simple by galactic standards, but Zethkari noticed details that made him uneasy. The walls contained what appeared to be decorative panels, but his scanner indicated they were actually sophisticated monitoring and defensive systems. The humans had turned their diplomatic facility into a fortress without making it obvious. Ambassador Chen Wei entered the room with 2 aides, all 3 wearing simple dark suits that managed to look both professional and somehow threatening. Chen was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. She moved with the confidence of someone who held real power. Ambassador Zethkari, Chen said in perfect hegemony formal speech, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Welcome to Luna Station. I trust your journey was comfortable. The casual politeness was unsettling. Most species showed some sign of nervousness when facing the Galactic Council's representatives. Chen appeared as relaxed as if she were meeting an old friend. Thank you for receiving me on such short notice, Ambassador Chen, Zethkari replied, taking the offered seat. I come bearing a message from the Galactic Council that requires your immediate attention. Of course. Chen settled into her chair with fluid grace. Please proceed. Zethkari activated his recording device and began reading the formal statement. The words carried the weight of 3,000 years of galactic law and the authority of 47 species. He outlined humanity's violations, the Council's concerns, and the specific demands for compliance. The ultimatum was clear: submit or face the consequences. Throughout the entire recitation, Ambassador Chen listened with perfect attention, occasionally nodding as if taking mental notes. She asked no questions, made no protests, and showed no sign of fear or anger. When Zethkari finished, silence filled the room. Finally, Chen spoke. Thank you for delivering the Council's message, Ambassador. It is quite comprehensive. The Council requires an immediate response, Zethkari said. Disturbed by her calm reaction, Chen smiled. And somehow that expression was more unsettling than any show of anger would have been. Of course, such an important matter deserves careful consideration. Would 72 hours be sufficient for us to prepare our response? Zethkari blinked in surprise. In his experience, species facing Council ultimatums either immediately capitulated or launched into desperate negotiations. Chen was asking for time as if she were scheduling a business meeting. 72 hours is acceptable, he managed. Excellent. Chen rose from her chair, her aides following suit. We will have our response ready for you then. In the meantime, please consider yourselves our honored guests. Luna Station's facilities are at your disposal. As the humans left the room, Zethkari sat in stunned silence. He had delivered ultimatums to 17 different species during his diplomatic career. Never before had he encountered such a calm, almost casual response to what amounted to a declaration of war. Something was very wrong here. The humans were not reacting like a species that had just been threatened with annihilation. They were reacting like a species that had been expecting this moment and had already decided what they were going to do about it. For the first time since the Council had made their decision, Ambassador Zethkari wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The 72-hour countdown had begun, and across the galaxy, 2 very different types of preparation were taking place. In the council chambers on Hegemony Prime, Admiral Kolvek spread tactical displays across the massive strategy table. The holographic projections showed fleet positions, supply lines, and attack vectors for what would be the largest military operation in galactic history. Representatives from every major military power in the Council had gathered to plan humanity's destruction. The humans have 12 primary colonies and 15 military outposts, Admiral Kolvex announced to the assembled War Council. His scarred carapace bore the marks of countless battles, and his reputation as the galaxy's finest military strategist was unquestioned. Our combined fleets number over 12,000 vessels. By any reasonable calculation, this should be a simple matter of overwhelming force. General Thokmar studied the displays with the practiced eye of a veteran warrior. What concerns me is their reaction to the ultimatum. I have conquered 47 worlds in my career, Admiral. I know the look of fear, and I know the look of defiance. The humans showed neither. Perhaps they simply do not understand the magnitude of what they face, and suggested Fleet Commander Silana of the Crystalline Domains. Her translucent form sparkled as she gestured to the fleet displays. They are a young species. They may not comprehend the power arrayed against them. Admiral Kolvek shook his massive head. I have reviewed every intelligence report we have on humanity. They are not naive and they are not stupid. Their rapid technological advancement alone proves that. No, there is something else at work here. The holographic display shifted to show human space in detail. Each colony world was marked with known defensive capabilities. But as the military leaders studied the information, they realized how little they actually knew. Our intelligence on their military capabilities is incomplete, admitted Spy Master Zithran, his insectoid form clicking nervously. Human ships use unusual materials that interfere with our sensors. Their communication systems are heavily encrypted with codes we have not been able to break. Most of our information comes from external observation rather than actual infiltration. This admission caused an uncomfortable stir among the military leadership. The Council's intelligence networks had successfully penetrated every known species in the galaxy. The fact that humanity remained largely opaque was deeply troubling. No matter, General Thokmar growled. Unknown capabilities cannot overcome a 12-to-1 disadvantage in numbers. We will hit them hard and fast before they can mount any significant resistance. While the Council planned their assault, a very different kind of activity was taking place throughout human space. An outside observer might have been puzzled by what they saw, or more accurately, by what they did not see. On New Geneva, families packed leisurely for what officials described as routine relocations. There was no panic, no desperate evacuation. Children went to school as normal while their parents quietly prepared for departure. The evacuation was so calm and orderly that Council surveillance initially failed to recognize it as an evacuation at all. Similar scenes played out across a dozen human worlds. Entire populations moved with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed dance, following protocols that had clearly been planned years in advance. Essential personnel remained at their posts, but civilian populations relocated to predetermined safe zones with minimal disruption to daily life. On Mars, Dr. Sarah Kim received a priority message that appeared to be about agricultural research funding. To anyone monitoring human communications, it looked like routine bureaucratic correspondence. But embedded within the lengthy technical report was a simple code that meant, Condition read, Protocol 7 is now active. Dr. Kim deleted the message and walked to her laboratory window, looking out at the red landscape where massive terraforming equipment continued its work. In 3 hours, she would submit her resignation and board a transport to the outer colonies. Her replacement would arrive shortly afterward, someone whose background was in a very different kind of science than agriculture. The transformation was happening everywhere, but so gradually that outside observers missed its significance. Civilian scientists departed for conferences and were replaced by personnel with military backgrounds. Trade ships altered their routes for efficiency improvements that just happened to position them near key hyperspace junctions. Research stations powered up experimental equipment that bore a suspicious resemblance to advanced sensor arrays. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the merchant vessel, New Dawn, watching her crew make final preparations. Officially, they were hauling manufactured goods to the outer rim colonies. In reality, A New Dawn carried enough firepower to take on a council cruiser, and her crew included some of the finest military minds in human space. Status report, Santos requested. All systems green. Captain, replied her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Chen. Stealth systems are operating at optimal efficiency. If anyone's watching, we're just another boring cargo hauler. Santos nodded. Across human space, hundreds of merchant vessels were taking similar positions. Each one looked harmless on sensors. Each one was actually a sophisticated military asset. The deception had taken decades to implement, but it was about to pay dividends. On Earth itself, the response to the Council's ultimatum was proceeding with typical human efficiency. In a secure bunker beneath Geneva, President Martinez reviewed reports from across human space, while her military advisors provided updates on deployment status. Evacuation phases 1 through 4 are complete, reported General Harrison. All civilian populations have been relocated to safe zones. Military assets are in position and ready for activation. Intelligence networks? Martinez asked. Fully operational, replied Director Walsh of Human Intelligence. We have real-time monitoring of Council fleet movements, political discussions, and military planning. They still have no idea how deeply we've penetrated their systems. President Martinez allowed herself a slight smile. Humanity had learned long ago that information was more valuable than any weapon. While the Council had been content to observe humans from a distance, humans had been quietly infiltrating every aspect of Council society. Human agents worked as translators, technicians, and traders throughout Council space. The aliens' own reliance on automated systems had made the job easier than anyone had expected. Economic disruption protocols, Martinez continued. Ready for implementation, confirmed Economic Advisor Thompson. We control enough trade routes and supply chains to cause significant disruption if necessary. The Council's economy is more fragile than they realize. The meeting continued for another hour, covering contingencies that had been planned for decades. Humanity had known this moment would come since first contact with the Galactic Council. The aliens had made their intentions clear from the beginning: submit or be destroyed. Humans had chosen a third option: prepare. Meanwhile, on Luna Station, Ambassador Zethkari was growing increasingly uncomfortable. The humans treating him as an honored guest, providing excellent accommodations and meals that had been carefully prepared to meet his species' dietary requirements. But there was something unsettling about their hospitality. The staff at Luna Station were too calm, too professional, too prepared for his arrival. When he had requested specific equipment for encrypted communications with the Council, the humans had provided it within minutes. When he had asked for detailed star charts of local space, they had been delivered before he finished making the request. Most disturbing of all was the complete lack of visible military preparation. Through his suite's windows, Zethkari could see human ships coming and going from the station, but there was no sign of panic or emergency deployment. Everything looked exactly as it had when he arrived. His aide, Junior Diplomat Krental, approached with the latest intelligence reports from Council monitoring stations. Ambassador, our observers report unusual patterns in human civilian shipping. Large numbers of vessels are moving, but we cannot determine their destinations or purposes. Zethkari reviewed the reports with growing unease. The movement patterns made no apparent sense from a military standpoint, but they clearly followed some kind of plan. The humans were doing something, but what? Have our military analysts reached any conclusions? He asked. They believe the humans may be attempting to evacuate their leadership and essential personnel. Krental replied. It could indicate preparation for surrender, or preparation for war, Zethkari muttered. In his experience, species that evacuated civilians before conflict were species that expected that conflict to be particularly devastating. He walked to the window and looked out at the blue Earth hanging in space below. Somewhere on that planet, humanity's leaders were deciding the fate of both their species and potentially the galaxy itself. The calm efficiency of everything he had observed suggested they had already made their decision long ago. As the final hours of the ultimatum ticked away, two very different philosophies of warfare were about to collide. The Council believed in overwhelming force applied with swift brutality. Humanity believed in patience, preparation, and precision. The galaxy was about to learn which approach was more effective. The countdown continued, and across human space, millions of people went about their daily lives with the quiet confidence. Exactly 72 hours after receiving the Galactic Council's ultimatum, Ambassador Chen Wei walked through the corridors of Luna Station with the measured pace of someone who had all the time in the world. Her aide carried a simple datapad containing humanity's response, while security personnel maintained their usual professional distance. To any observer, it looked like another routine diplomatic meeting. Ambassador Zethkari waited in the same conference room where he had delivered the Council's demands 3 days earlier. He had spent those 3 days analyzing every scrap of intelligence his people could gather about human activities. The results had only deepened his concerns. Human behavior during the ultimatum period defied every conventional pattern of species facing annihilation. The door slid open with barely a whisper, and Ambassador Chen entered with her small entourage. She appeared exactly as composed as she had during their first meeting, showing no signs of stress or sleepless nights. If anything, she seemed more relaxed than before. "Ambassador Zethkari," Chen said with a warm smile, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "I hope your stay at Luna Station has been comfortable." "Quite comfortable, thank you," Zethkari replied, though comfort was the last thing on his mind. "I trust humanity has reached a decision regarding the Council's requirements?" "Indeed we have." Chen settled into her chair with fluid grace, placing her hands folded on the table before her. "We have given the matter our complete attention." Zethkari activated his recording device and prepared to document what he expected would be either humanity's surrender or their desperate attempt at negotiation. In his centuries of diplomatic experience, he had never encountered a species that chose any other option when faced with the combined might of the Galactic Council. "Before I deliver our formal response," Chen began, "I want to thank the Council for their clear communication. There is something refreshing about dealing with people who state their intentions so directly." The comment struck Zethkari as odd, but he gestured for her to continue. Chen looked directly into his eyes, and her expression shifted subtly. The warm diplomatic smile remained, but something colder appeared behind it. "Humanity's response to the Galactic Council's ultimatum is as follows. We respectfully decline your offer." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Zethkari felt his blood chill as the implications sank in. "Decline? Ambassador Chen, I do not think you understand the gravity of this situation. The Council has assembled the largest military force in galactic history. Your colonies will be destroyed. Your species will be scattered to the furthest reaches of space." "We understand the Council's capabilities perfectly," Chen replied, with the same calm tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. "We also understand our own. The decision has been made after careful consideration of all factors." Zethkari leaned forward, his diplomatic composure beginning to crack. "What factors?" "You have 12 colonies facing 12,000 ships. Your military has existed for less than 2 centuries, while ours has maintained galactic peace for 3 millennia. What possible calculation leads to this madness?" Chen's smile never wavered. "Perhaps our calculations include variables that the Council has not considered." "Such as?" Instead of answering directly, Chen gestured to her aide, who placed a small data storage device on the table between them. "We prepared something for the Council, a small token of appreciation for their forthright approach to diplomacy." Zethkari stared at the device suspiciously. "What is it?" "Information," Chen said simply. "We thought the Council might find it interesting." Against his better judgment, Zethkari inserted the device into his portable reader. The first file that appeared made him freeze in his chair. It was a detailed psychological profile of Council Speaker Velthon, including information about his personal finances, family relationships, and private medical conditions. Information that was supposed to be classified at the highest levels of Council security. With growing horror, Zethkari scrolled through the files. Detailed intelligence reports on every major Council species, military capabilities that were classified beyond top secret, economic analyses that revealed critical vulnerabilities in Council supply chains, personal information about Council leaders that not even their closest aides should have known. The files seemed to go on forever. Human intelligence had penetrated every level of Council society, from the highest political offices to the most sensitive military installations. They knew the exact composition of the fleet being assembled against them. They knew the political arguments that had led to the ultimatum. They knew things about Council species that those species did not know about themselves. How? Zethkari whispered, his voice barely audible. The same way we developed faster than light travel in record time, Chen replied. The same way we established 37 colonies in 2 centuries. The same way we built a military that concerns the entire Galactic Council. We work very, very hard and we pay attention to details. Zethkari's hands shook as he continued scrolling through the intelligence files. This is impossible. Our security systems are impenetrable. Our codes are unbreakable. Your security systems were designed by committee over several centuries, with input from dozens of species who prioritized compatibility over protection. Chen interrupted gently. Your codes rely on mathematical principles that we solved in our undergraduate computer science classes. Your intelligence services assume that other species think the same way you do. The truth was devastating in its simplicity. The Council's greatest strength, its diversity and cooperative approach, had become its greatest weakness. Systems designed to work for 47 different species were systems optimized for convenience rather than security. The humans had walked through their defenses as easily as walking through an open door. This changes nothing, Zethkari said, though his voice lacked conviction. Intelligence gathering does not stop naval bombardments. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. You know, that's an interesting point. Let me share something else with you. She nodded to her aide, who produced another data pad. This one displayed shipping manifests, trade routes, and economic data that painted a picture Zethkari had never considered. Did you know that 73% of the Council's food distribution relies on automated cargo ships? Chen asked conversationally. Or that the Karathi military supply chain depends on a computer network that we've had access to for 15 years. Or that the power grid for Hegemony Prime can be controlled remotely by anyone with the right access codes. The data pad showed human infiltration of infrastructure across Council space. Not just military or political systems, but the fundamental networks that kept galactic civilization functioning. Transportation, communication, power distribution, food production, medical supplies. Humans had quietly positioned themselves as essential components of systems that the Council could not function without. You see, Ambassador, Chen continued, humanity learned something important when we first encountered the Galactic Council. We learned that the galaxy operates on the principle that might makes right. The strong dominate the weak, and civilizations survive by being stronger than their neighbors. Zethkari nodded slowly. This was indeed the fundamental truth of galactic politics. But we also learned that there are different kinds of strength, Chen said. The Council focuses on military might and political authority. You build big ships and form alliances to project power. That's one approach, and it has worked well for you for thousands of years. And your approach? Zethkari asked, though he was beginning to understand. We build dependencies, Chen said simply. We make ourselves indispensable. We integrate ourselves so thoroughly into the fabric of galactic civilization that removing us would cause more damage than leaving us alone. We don't conquer territory, we conquer systems. Not military systems, but the systems that make modern life possible. The implications were staggering. While the Council had been watching human military expansion, humanity had been quietly taking control of the infrastructure that kept Council civilization running. They had not sought to dominate through force but through indispensability. The Council's fleet might destroy our colonies, Chen acknowledged. But the moment those attacks begin, every automated system we've touched will begin to malfunction. Supply ships will lose their way. Power grids will experience cascading failures. Communication networks will suffer mysterious breakdowns. Food shipments will be delayed or misdirected. Zethkari stared at her in growing horror. You would cripple innocent civilian populations to protect yourselves? We would defend ourselves using every tool at our disposal, Chen corrected. Just as the Council is prepared to destroy human civilians to maintain their authority. The difference is that our approach offers alternatives. What alternatives? Chen leaned back in her chair, her expression becoming almost friendly. The Council can continue with their planned attack, and we will respond as we deem appropriate. Or the Council can reconsider their position. Perhaps there is room in the galaxy for a species that approaches problems differently than has been traditional. You're proposing negotiation? The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted 18 hours. When Ambassador Zethkari delivered humanity's response and the accompanying intelligence files, the chamber erupted into chaos that took hours to control. Species that had been allies for centuries suddenly eyed each other with suspicion, knowing that humans had access to their most sensitive secrets. Admiral Kolvik studied the intelligence data with the grim expression of a professional soldier who had just learned that his enemy knew everything about his battle plans. This changes the tactical situation significantly, he admitted to the assembled War Council. However, it does not change the fundamental mathematics of the engagement. Information warfare cannot stop kinetic bombardment. General Thokmar slammed his massive fist on the strategy table, causing the holographic displays to flicker. Let them play their games with our computers and supply chains. When their worlds are burning craters, they will understand what real power means. Not everyone shared the general's confidence. Fleet Commander Silana of the Crystalline Domains had spent the past few hours reviewing the human intelligence files that pertained to her own species. The depth of their knowledge was disturbing. They know our fleet compositions, our defensive strategies, even our emergency protocols, she reported. This is not random intelligence gathering. This is systematic preparation for conflict. They have been planning for this war since first contact. Then we give them the war they have been planning for. Admiral Kolvex declared. All fleets will advance to their designated positions. Operation Galactic Peace will commence in 6 hours. The largest military armada in galactic history began moving toward human space like a slowly closing fist. 12,000 ships from 47 different species, representing every major military force in the galaxy. The firepower concentrated in that fleet could sterilize entire star systems. On the bridge of the command dreadnought Righteous Authority, Admiral Kolvex watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. The human colonies were pitifully defended compared to the force bearing down on them. A few dozen ships scattered across 12 systems, facing an armada that had never known defeat. Admiral, reported his tactical officer, we are detecting unusual communication patterns from the target systems. Heavy encryption, short bursts, no apparent pattern. Probably coordination between their defensive forces, Kolvex replied dismissively. It will not matter. Communications officer, transmit the surrender demand on all frequencies. The message was broadcast across human space in every known language. Attention human settlements. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Failure to comply will result in immediate military action. This is your final warning. On New Geneva, the colonists received the message while going about their daily routines. Children played in parks while their parents worked in offices and factories. The surrender demand was broadcast on public screens, but instead of panic, there was an almost eerie calm. Mayor Elizabeth Foster stood in the colony's central plaza, addressing a crowd of citizens who had gathered to hear the official response. As you all know, the Galactic Council has demanded our surrender, she announced. The colonial government's response is simple. New Geneva does not surrender. The crowd's reaction was not the desperate cheering of people facing annihilation, but the quiet determination of people who had prepared for this moment their entire lives. They dispersed calmly to their assigned positions, following protocols that had been drilled into them since childhood. Similar scenes played out across human space. Colonies received the surrender demand and rejected it with matter-of-fact certainty. There was no desperation, no last-minute panic, no calls for help. Just quiet determination and systematic preparation. Admiral Kolvex watched the countdown timer reach 0 with grim satisfaction. The humans have chosen their path. All units commence bombardment. Target military installations first, then population centers. The order went out across the fleet and 12,000 ships began their attack. Energy beams lanced through space toward human worlds, while missile salvos darkened the void between the stars. It was a display of firepower that should have ended the conflict in minutes. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The human ships did not meet the Council fleet in traditional battle formation. They did not attempt to defend fixed positions or protect their colonies through superior firepower. They simply disappeared. Admiral, the tactical officer reported with confusion. We are not detecting any human military vessels in the target systems. Impossible, Kolvex snapped. They have to be there. Ships cannot simply vanish. But they had vanished. Every human military vessel in every targeted system had somehow slipped away before the Council forces arrived. The bombardment struck empty space stations and abandoned military installations. The colonies themselves were defended only by automated systems that put up token resistance before being overwhelmed. Perhaps they evacuated their forces to preserve them for a counterattack, suggested the tactical. Officer Admiral Kolvex studied the tactical displays with growing unease. In his long career, he had never encountered an enemy that abandoned their positions without a fight. It went against every conventional military doctrine. His unease turned to alarm when the first reports began arriving from Council space. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving priority distress calls from Hegemony Prime. They report massive system failures across their infrastructure network." "What kind of failures?" "Power grid fluctuations, transportation network shutdowns, communication breakdowns. They are requesting immediate technical assistance." Before Admiral Kolvex could respond, more reports flooded in. The Karathi homeworld was experiencing similar problems. The crystalline domains reported that their manufacturing centers had gone offline. Trade Federation commercial networks were failing across 17 systems. "This cannot be coincidence," Admiral Kolvex muttered. The humans said there would be consequences. The scope of the infrastructure failures became clear over the following hours. Across Council space, the automated systems that controlled everything from food distribution to waste management began experiencing cascading malfunctions. Nothing catastrophic at first, just inefficiencies that accumulated into serious problems. Supply ships arrived at the wrong destinations. Power grids fluctuated, causing rolling blackouts. Communication networks experienced mysterious delays and routing errors. Medical facilities found their diagnostic equipment giving inconsistent readings. Banking systems suffered transaction processing delays that began disrupting commercial activities. "How are they doing this?" General Thokmar demanded during an emergency strategy session aboard his flagship. "Our forces have destroyed their military installations. Their ships have fled the battlefield. How can they continue to attack us?" The answer came from Intelligence Coordinator Zithran, whose analysis of the human intelligence files had revealed the scope of their infiltration. "They are not attacking us, General. They are simply no longer maintaining us." "Explain." "Our investigation reveals that humans have been quietly integrated into our infrastructure for decades, not through conquest or obvious infiltration, but by making themselves useful. They provided technical assistance, improved efficiency, solved problems. Over time, our systems became dependent on their involvement. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not planted viruses or sabotage programs in Council systems. They had made themselves indispensable, and now they were withdrawing that support. The result was not dramatic explosions or obvious attacks, but the slow degradation of the complex systems that kept galactic civilization functioning. "Can we restore normal operations without human assistance?" General Thokmar asked. "Eventually," Zithran replied, "but it will take months or possibly years to fully understand all the ways our systems have become dependent on human involvement. In the meantime, we must deal with increasing inefficiencies and potential system failures." As if to emphasize his point, the lights in the conference room flickered. A moment later, the ship's communication officer reported that they had lost contact with 17 Council fleets due to routing errors in the communication network. Meanwhile, the human counterattack was just beginning to reveal its true nature. Captain Maria Santos smiled as she watched her tactical display aboard the New Dawn. Her ship had spent 3 days shadowing a Council supply convoy, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Target the lead vessel's cargo containers," she ordered. "Make it look like an accident." The New Dawn's weapons were not designed for destruction but for precision. A carefully placed shot severed the magnetic clamps holding the supply ship's cargo pods. The containers drifted away into space, their contents lost but the ship itself undamaged. "Communications intercept indicates they believe it was a mechanical failure," reported her first officer. "They are requesting technical assistance." Similar incidents were occurring throughout Council space. Human ships, still disguised as civilian vessels, struck at supply lines with surgical precision. They did not destroy Council ships, which would have provoked massive retaliation. Instead, they caused delays, misdirected shipments, and created the appearance of systematic incompetence in Council logistics. Admiral Kolvex found himself fighting an enemy he could not locate. Using tactics he did 6 months after the Galactic Council's declaration of war against humanity, the great chamber that had once housed the most powerful governing body in galactic history stood nearly empty. Only a handful of delegates remained, and they spent more time arguing among themselves than conducting any meaningful business. The crystalline domains had been the first to break ranks. 3 months into the conflict, their manufacturing sector had collapsed so completely that they could no longer maintain their military contribution to the Council fleet. Fleet Commander Silana had quietly withdrawn her forces and opened negotiations with human trade representatives. The Trade Federation followed 2 weeks later. Their commercial networks had become so unreliable that member species were establishing direct trade relationships with humanity rather than working through Federation channels. When the Federation tried to prohibit these arrangements, entire member species simply left the organization. One by one, the great powers that had ruled the galaxy for millennia found themselves unable to maintain their authority, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because the systems that supported their governance had become too unreliable to function effectively. Admiral Kolvex stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at tactical displays that showed the slow disintegration of everything he had spent his life defending. His fleet still numbered in the thousands. His weapons could still destroy planets, but none of that mattered anymore. The war he was fighting was not the war he knew how to win. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we have received another defection notice. The Outer Rim Alliance is withdrawing from the Council and has signed a non-aggression pact with humanity." Kolvex nodded grimly. It was the 14th such defection this month. Species that had been loyal Council members for centuries were abandoning the Alliance and making separate peace with humanity, not because they had been conquered, but because dealing with humans had become more profitable and reliable than maintaining their Council membership. "What is our current operational status?" Kolvex asked his chief of staff. "We have lost contact with approximately 30% of our fleet due to communication network failures. Supply deliveries are running 4 weeks behind schedule. Personnel rotations have been suspended because our transport ships keep getting lost in hyperspace. And we are receiving reports that several member species are refusing to provide replacement parts for our equipment." The systematic degradation had been slow but relentless. Human forces continued to avoid direct confrontation, preferring to strike at the infrastructure that kept the Council's military machine functioning. Supply routes became unreliable. Communication networks suffered mysterious delays. Even basic navigation systems began experiencing technical difficulties that seemed to occur whenever Council ships were operating in contested areas. But the most devastating blow had been economic. Human trade networks had quietly replaced Council systems across large portions of the galaxy. Species that tried to maintain their Council membership found themselves increasingly isolated as their neighbors established profitable relationships with humanity. On Earth, President Martinez reviewed the latest reports from across human space with quiet satisfaction. The war had cost them dearly in some respects. Several colonies had been bombarded and would take years to rebuild, but the strategic objectives had been achieved. "Status report," she requested from her cabinet. "Colonial reconstruction is proceeding ahead of schedule," reported Colonial Administrator Johnson. "The evacuated populations are returning to the damaged worlds, and we expect full restoration of all facilities within 18 months. Economic integration continues to expand," added Economic Coordinator Williams. "We now handle approximately 60% of interstellar trade in our operational sectors. Former Council species are requesting formal incorporation into our trade networks at a rate of 3 to 4 per week." "Military situation?" Martinez asked. General Harrison consulted his datapad. Council forces remain strong in terms of raw numbers, but their operational effectiveness has degraded significantly. More importantly, their political support continues to erode. We estimate that the Council as a governing body will be effectively defunct within 6 months. President Martinez nodded. The strategy had worked exactly as planned. Humanity had not tried to match the Council's military might or conquer their territory through force. Instead, they had made the Council's governing model obsolete by offering a better alternative. The key insight had been recognizing that the Council's power depended not on their military strength, but on their role as the coordinator of galactic civilization, trade, communication, transportation, technology sharing. All of these functions required large, complex administrative systems. The Council had provided those systems for 3,000 years, but humanity had built better systems. More efficient, more reliable, more responsive to the needs of member species. When the old systems began failing due to human withdrawal of support, Species naturally gravitated toward the alternatives that humans provided. It was not conquest in any traditional sense. It was more like a hostile corporate takeover conducted on a galactic scale. Ambassador Chen Wei, now bearing the title of Director of the Terran Administrative Zone, prepared for what would likely be her most important meeting since the crisis began. In an hour, she would meet with representatives from the former council powers to discuss the future of galactic governance. The meeting location was symbolic: Luna Station, where humanity had received the council's ultimatum 6 months earlier. But this time, the humans were the ones setting the agenda. Chen entered the conference room to find a very different group than she had expected. Instead of the proud representatives of galactic superpowers, she faced a collection of tired, worried diplomats whose species were struggling to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing galaxy. Ambassador Zethkari was there, representing what remained of the hegemony. General Thokmar attended on behalf of the Karathi Empire, though his military's effectiveness had been severely compromised by supply chain failures. Fleet Commander Silana represented the crystalline domains, which had already signed several cooperation agreements with humanity. Director Chen, Zethkari began formally, "We have come to discuss terms for ending this conflict." Chen settled into her chair with the same calm composure she had shown throughout the crisis. "I appreciate your visit, Ambassador. However, I should clarify that humanity does not consider this a conflict requiring termination. We consider it a transition period during which galactic governance is being restructured to be more effective." The distinction was important. By framing the situation as evolution rather than conquest, Chen was offering the former council powers a way to save face while accepting their new reality. "What role do you envision for our species in this new structure?" asked Fleet Commander Silana. "The same role as any other species," Chen replied. "Full participation in galactic civilization, based on your ability to contribute meaningfully to collective prosperity and security." General Thokmar leaned forward aggressively. "You speak as if you now rule the galaxy." Chen's expression remained pleasant but firm. "We do not rule anyone, General. We simply provide administrative services that species find more efficient than previous alternatives. Any species that prefers different arrangements is free to pursue them." The implication was clear. Species could choose to work with humanity, or they could try to maintain their independence. But the old council system was no longer available as an option. "What specific arrangements are you proposing?" Zethkari asked. Chen gestured to her aide, who distributed datapads containing detailed proposals. "We are establishing the Terran Administrative Zone as a voluntary association of species interested in efficient governance and mutual prosperity. Members contribute according to their capabilities and receive benefits according to their needs." The delegates reviewed the proposals with growing surprise. Rather than the harsh terms they had expected from conquerors, they found reasonable agreements that actually offered them better representation than they had enjoyed under the council system. "The economic integration alone would increase our trade volume by 40%, Silana murmured as she studied the projections. "Our administrative costs would decrease by 60%, Zethkari noted. "These terms are generous," General Thokmar admitted reluctantly. "They are practical," Chen corrected. "Humanity has learned that prosperity shared is prosperity multiplied. We have no interest in ruling over impoverished or resentful subjects. We prefer wealthy, satisfied partners." The philosophical difference was fundamental. The council had maintained control through superior force and political manipulation. Humanity offered partnership based on mutual benefit and voluntary association. Over the following hours, the details were worked out with surprising ease. Former council species would maintain their internal autonomy while participating in human-administered networks for trade, communication, and security. The transition would be gradual, allowing time for cultural adaptation. Most importantly, there would be no punishment for species that had participated in the war against human.